When Love Turns Bad, a story of lost control. Imagine a quiet neighborhood where everything seems peaceful, but beneath the surface, dark secrets lie hidden. Today, we dive into a chilling tale from Reddit, one that will make you question how well you really know the people around you. In this story, we uncover a series of strange and unsettling events that take a shocking turn. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on more gripping Reddit stories like this one. Join us as we unravel the mystery and explore the twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat. With trembling hands, he hesitated for a moment before reaching for the blanket's edge. A cold sense of dread settled over him as he slowly lifted it. Beneath the blanket, the sight that met his eyes was harrowing. Danielle Jones lay motionless on the cold, unyielding floor, her lifeless body shrouded in an eerie stillness. The room seemed to close in on him, the air heavy and suffocating. A chill ran down his spine as he took in the marks of brutality that scarred her body. Each injury spoke volumes, painting a grim picture of unimaginable violence. The silence was almost unbearable, as though the walls themselves mourned the tragedy before him. Danielle Finley Jones was more than just a victim of this horrific act. She was a young woman with a life full of potential. Born on October 20th, 1991, in Cranebrook, a peaceful suburb in western Sydney, Danielle grew up as the youngest in her family. She had an older brother, Blake, who was more than just a sibling. He was her protector and her greatest ally. From an early age, their bond was unshakable, a source of comfort and strength for them both. However, Danielle's childhood wasn't without its challenges. When she was just 4 years old, her parents separated and their family dynamic shifted dramatically. After the divorce, Danielle and Blake stayed with their mother, Jacqueline, a woman whose resilience became the cornerstone of their upbringing. Jacqueline took on the roles of both parents, ensuring her children felt supported despite the absence of their father. Their father drifted out of their lives, playing only a minimal role in their journey. But Jacqueline's unwavering determination created a nurturing environment for Danielle and her brother. It was in this space of love and resilience that Danielle began to shape her identity and pursue her passions. From a young age, Danielle displayed a love for sports that set her apart. While many of her peers were drawn to activities like dancing or gymnastics, Danielle found her passion in the thrill of competitive sports. Soccer, in particular, captured her heart. Her enthusiasm for the game was evident even in her early school years. With no local girls' teams available, Danielle joined boys' teams, an experience that pushed her to become tougher and more determined. Her perseverance paid off as she excelled on the field, earning the respect of her teammates and coaches. Over time, Danielle's dedication and natural skills shone brightly, and she was soon recognized as a standout player. She was appointed team captain, a role that reflected her leadership abilities and deep understanding of the game. Her efforts did not go unnoticed as she collected numerous awards and accolades for her performance. Soccer wasn't just a sport for Danielle, it was a passion that defined much of her life. Danielle's story, however, wasn't solely about her accomplishments, it was also about her courage, determination, and the relationships she cherished. Her journey from a small-town girl with big dreams to a celebrated athlete was inspiring. Yet, as the chilling reality of her tragic end set in, those who knew her couldn't help but reflect on the vibrant, determined young woman whose life had been unjustly cut short. Danielle's presence on the soccer field was nothing short of commanding. Her teammates admired her leadership and dedication, her fans celebrated her remarkable talent, and her opponents often dreaded facing her. She played with an intensity and precision that left little doubt about her abilities. But Danielle's contributions to soccer didn't end when she stopped competing as a player. Her love for the game continued as she While her athletic career flourished, Danielle's academic ambitions were equally impressive. After graduating from high school with excellent grades, she pursued higher education at the University of Sydney. She chose to study education and social work, fields that aligned with her compassionate nature and her desire to make a positive impact. For Danielle, these studies weren't just about earning a degree, they were part of her mission to help others and contribute meaningfully to her community. Following her graduation, Danielle began working as a teacher at a local school. Her role allowed her to combine her passion for education with her love for guiding and shaping young minds. Despite the demands of her teaching career, she continued to stay deeply involved in soccer, balancing her professional life with her commitment to the sport. Danielle's ability to juggle her responsibilities made her a role model for her students, colleagues, and everyone who knew her. Those closest to Danielle often described her as someone who radiated positivity and warmth. Her athletic build and striking features might have initially drawn people's attention, but it was her genuine kindness and willingness to help others that left a lasting impression. She had a magnetic personality that made people feel valued and comfortable in her presence. While she had many admirers, Danielle remained deeply focused on her goals, prioritizing her career and passions over romantic relationships. Despite her independence, Danielle chose to stay in her mother Jacqueline's home. Their relationship was far more than the typical bond between a parent and child. It was one of profound friendship and mutual respect. The two were inseparable, sharing not just a home, but countless experiences, from attending concerts to enjoying nights out together. Their connection was marked by honesty and a complete lack of conflict. As Danielle approached her 30th birthday, she began to reflect on her life, considering new directions and aspirations for the future. By her late 20s, Danielle had achieved much of what she had worked so hard for. She was financially independent, had built a respected career, and was surrounded by a close-knit group of friends who admired her ambition and kindness. Yet, despite her outward success, there was an undeniable emptiness in her life. Danielle often found herself longing for a deeper connection, one that went beyond friendship or professional camaraderie. She dreamed of finding a partner she could trust completely, someone with whom she could share her hopes, challenges, and aspirations. Over the years, Danielle had ventured into the world of dating, but found it difficult to maintain lasting relationships. While she wasn't short of admirers, her high standards and focused mindset meant that she quickly ended relationships if they clashed with her goals or priorities. She hadn't yet met anyone who felt like a true partner, someone who complemented her drive and matched her values. However, as she neared her 30th birthday, Danielle realized she was ready for something more, a relationship rooted in trust, love, and mutual support. Encouraged by her friends, Danielle decided to expand her search. While she already received plenty of attention on her social media accounts, she knew that meaningful connections were rare in those spaces. After some hesitation, she turned to dating apps, hoping they might help her find someone who shared her desire for a serious relationship. She carefully crafted a profile that reflected her personality, highlighting her love for soccer, her passion for teaching, and her appreciation for life's simple joys. The journey wasn't without its challenges. Weeks turned into months, and Danielle found herself growing frustrated. Most of the matches she encountered led to brief conversations or lackluster dates. The superficial nature of online dating left her disheartened, and she began to wonder if she'd ever find someone who truly resonated with her. Just when she was considering giving up, a message arrived that caught her attention. It was from a man named Ashley Goy. Ashley, who was 4 years older than Danielle, came across as warm and genuine in his initial message. Unlike many others, his approach was thoughtful and engaging. Their online conversations quickly grew into something more meaningful, with both of them eagerly sharing stories, jokes, and insights about their lives. After a week of chatting, Ashley suggested they meet in person. Intrigued by their first meeting exceeded all her expectations. Over dinner, the two of them talked endlessly, exchanging laughter and stories that made the hours disappear in an instant. There was an undeniable spark between them, as though they had known each other for years. Ashley's wit and warmth were refreshing, and Danielle found herself genuinely enjoying his company. After just a couple of dates, Danielle was so impressed by Ashley that she decided to introduce him to her mother, Jacqueline, whose protective instincts and perceptive nature had always guided Danielle in her relationships. When Ashley met Jacqueline, Danielle's mother, his charm and polished manners left a strong impression. Jacqueline, known for her sharp intuition, found herself approving of him. She saw qualities in Ashley that she believed would make him a good husband and father. Her endorsement reassured Danielle, strengthening her feelings for him and adding an extra layer of confidence to their budding relationship. For a brief time, everything seemed perfect, and Danielle felt she had finally found the connection she had been longing for. However, the honeymoon phase of their relationship was short-lived. As weeks went by, Ashley began to show a different side of himself, one that was far from the kind and caring persona he had initially displayed. He grew controlling and possessive, often demanding to know Danielle's whereabouts and questioning her choices. For many, these behaviors would have been alarming, but Danielle interpreted them differently. She saw his jealousy and need for control as proof of how deeply he cared for her, mistaking his possessiveness for love. Ashley's need to control Danielle escalated quickly. Within a month, he started dictating whom she could spend time with and which social events she was allowed to attend. He even attempted to influence her daily routine, suggesting how she should spend her free time. His jealousy extended to her circle of friends, and he pressured her to limit contact with certain people, claiming they were a bad influence. Danielle, who had never experienced a relationship like this before, found herself confused but intrigued by the new dynamic. Instead of confronting Ashley about his behavior, Danielle rationalized it. She convinced herself that his actions came from a place of care and protection rather than control. Her lack of experience in serious relationships made it difficult for her to recognize the warning signs. She ignored the growing discomfort in her heart and focused instead on the moments when Ashley's charm and affection shone through. He spoke often about his dreams of building a future together, including starting a family, a vision that resonated deeply with Danielle. To outsiders, however, Ashley's facade was beginning to crack, and Danielle's closest friends started noticing unsettling changes in her demeanor and behavior. One friend, who was particularly outspoken, became especially concerned. She observed Ashley's erratic behavior during moments of jealousy, which sometimes made him seem like a completely different person. Worried for Danielle's well-being, she decided to speak up. She urged Danielle to take a step back and evaluate the situation, warning her about the dangers of ignoring such red flags. Unfortunately, Danielle was too caught up in her feelings to heed her friend's warnings. Blinded by her emotions and convinced of Ashley's good intentions, she dismissed the concerns as baseless. She believed her friend was being overly critical and refused to entertain the idea that Ashley might not be the person he appeared to be. Danielle's inability to see the toxic pattern forming around her left her vulnerable, and those who cared about her could only watch helplessly as she fell deeper into Ashley's manipulative grasp. Over the course of their relationship, Danielle had gradually introduced Ashley to a handful of her closest friends. Most of her wider social circle, however, only knew him through her glowing descriptions. On Saturday, December 17th, 2022, Danielle decided it was time to formally introduce Ashley to more of her friends. To do this, she planned a lively gathering at a popular city bar, inviting her close-knit group for an evening of drinks, laughter, and camaraderie. She hoped the night would allow Ashley to connect with the people who mattered most to her. The bar was buzzing with energy that evening, filled with music, dancing, and the chatter of friends catching up. Ashley seemed to fit right in, effortlessly charming everyone he met. He was attentive to Danielle, holding her hand and exchanging warm smiles throughout the night. His confident demeanor and polite interactions left a positive impression on most of the group. To outsiders, Ashley and Danielle seemed like the perfect couple, deeply in love, supportive, and completely at ease with one another. This marked a significant change for Danielle, who had rarely introduced her previous boyfriends to her friends. In the past, she had refrained from involving her social circle, as those relationships had never felt serious enough to warrant it. This time, however, Danielle presented Ashley with a level of confidence that surprised many. Her friends noted the shift and were happy to see her so invested, though a few couldn't shake their uneasy feelings about Ashley. Nevertheless, they trusted Danielle's judgment and tried to embrace her enthusiasm for the relationship. As the night progressed, the group decided to play a game to add some playful excitement to the evening. It was a question and answer game designed to be lighthearted and fun, with participants drawing random, often cheeky prompts to respond to. The room buzzed with laughter as the friends took turns answering questions about embarrassing moments, odd habits, or wild adventures. The game brought a sense of shared amusement and closeness to the group, further enhancing the festive atmosphere. When Danielle's turn came, she reached for her question, laughing nervously as she read it aloud. The prompt asked if she had ever had a one-night stand with a stranger. A sudden hush fell over the group, the boisterous energy temporarily subdued. Danielle hesitated, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment, before offering a shy smile and admitting, "Yes, I have." She delivered her answer with a mix of honesty and humor, hoping to lighten the mood. While most of the group chuckled and moved on, Ashley's reaction was anything but ordinary. The change in Ashley was immediate and chilling. His charming facade melted away, replaced by an expression of anger. Ashley's reaction was swift and shocking. Without warning, he grabbed Danielle firmly by the arm, yanking her toward him with a force that caused her to stumble. The abruptness of his actions silenced the room, and the lively chatter came to an abrupt halt. His voice, loud and filled with anger, cut through the stillness like a blade. He hurled accusations at Danielle, calling her irresponsible and questioning her morals. His tone was harsh, and the language he used was both cruel and humiliating, leaving no doubt that he was no longer in control of his emotions. The group of friends sat frozen in disbelief, their expressions a mixture of shock and discomfort. Some exchanged uneasy glances, unsure if they should intervene or let the situation play out. For a moment, the outburst seemed so extreme that it felt surreal, like a scene from a drama rather than something happening right in front of them. Danielle stood motionless, her face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. She seemed unable to process the sudden shift in Ashley's demeanor or the magnitude of his rage. Ashley continued his tirade, his voice growing louder and his words more venomous. He accused Danielle of deceit and betrayal, pointing to a conversation they had shared during their first date. He claimed he had asked her a similar question back then about casual romantic encounters, and she had denied ever having one. To him, her admission now in front of others felt like a deliberate humiliation. Each accusation was more cutting than the last, attacking not just Danielle's character, but also her honesty. Danielle, struggling to regain her composure, attempted to respond. Her voice was soft, tinged with disbelief as she tried to diffuse the escalating conflict. She spoke in calm, measured tones, hoping to reassure Ashley and restore some semblance of normalcy to the evening. However, her efforts only seemed to fuel his anger further. His face contorted with fury and his words became even more aggressive. The intensity of his reaction left her shaken and vulnerable, and her attempts at reconciliation were met with outright hostility. In a final act of anger, Ashley shoved Danielle away with a forceful gesture, his expression filled with contempt. Without another word, he stormed out of the bar, slamming the door behind him. The room remained silent, the air heavy with tension and disbelief. Danielle's friends looked on, their concern evident, but no one dared to speak. All eyes were on Danielle, who stood frozen in place, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Outside, Ashley's anger showed no signs of subsiding. In the dimly lit parking lot, he paced back and forth like a caged animal, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, and he finally pulled it out to send a barrage of messages to Danielle. Each text was more hostile and demeaning than the last, filled with accusations and insults. The venom in his words was palpable, his anger spilling out through the screen in a relentless stream. Anyone watching from afar would have seen a man consumed by rage, unable or unwilling to control the storm inside him. After the intense outburst, Danielle felt a surge of responsibility to prevent the situation from worsening. She quickly apologized to her friends, her voice shaking as she explained that she needed to handle things with Ashley directly. "I'm so sorry, everyone," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "I need to talk to him alone and try to calm him down." Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Danielle stepped outside the lively bar to confront Ashley in the cool night air. Outside, the tension was thick. Ashley stood in the dimly lit parking lot, his face still flushed with anger. Danielle approached him cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to reach the man she thought she knew. "Ashley, please," she began softly. "Let's talk about what just happened. It's not worth ruining tonight for both of us." For about 15 minutes, they stood there in silence, the only sounds being the distant hum of traffic and the occasional laughter from inside the bar. Slowly, Ashley's expression began to soften and he nodded reluctantly before returning to the group. When Danielle and Ashley re-entered the bar, it was as if nothing had transpired. They joined their friends, who watched the reunion with a mix of relief and curiosity. The couple maintained a calm exterior. The night continued smoothly after the outburst. Ashley seemed more reserved and polite, engaging in conversations without any hint of his previous anger. The group laughed, danced, and shared stories, creating new memories that overshadowed the earlier conflict. As midnight approached, it was time to head home. Danielle had arranged to stay the night at her friend Taylor's house, knowing the long drive back would be exhausting. Taylor, always a considerate host, welcomed them without hesitation, offering his home in a quiet suburban neighborhood just 20 minutes away. Upon arriving at Taylor's house, Rachel, Taylor's girlfriend, who had chosen not to drink that evening, offered to drive them the rest of the way. Taylor quickly set up a cozy guest room for Danielle and Ashley on the lower level of his house. The room featured a comfortable bed, a private bathroom, and a small window that let in just enough light to make the space feel welcoming. "Thank you so much, Taylor," Danielle said gratefully. Both she and Ashley settled into the guest room, hoping for a peaceful night after the evening's earlier turmoil. Everything seemed to calm down as they prepared for bed. Danielle, always optimistic, believed that the worst was behind them and that the rest of the night would pass without incident. She and Ashley talked quietly, trying to reconnect and leave the earlier argument behind. However, around 3 a.m., Taylor was awakened by unusual noises coming from the guest room. He cautiously approached the door, concerned by the sounds of muffled voices and movements. The peaceful night was about to take another unexpected turn, leaving Taylor wondering what was happening inside. The faint, rhythmic thuds in the stillness of the night carried an unsettling air that made Taylor sit up in bed. He strained to listen, his heart beating slightly faster with each sound. Beside him, Rachel stirred, her sleepy eyes blinking with confusion. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible yet tinged with unease. Taylor shrugged, unable to offer a satisfying explanation. The noises continued, faint but persistent, like something heavy being moved or dropped against the floor. For a moment, Taylor considered the possibility that Danielle and Ashley were having a disagreement or perhaps reconciling in a more intimate way. Deciding it wasn't his place to interfere, he exchanged a knowing look with Rachel. "Let's just leave them to it," he murmured, trying to reassure her. She nodded hesitantly, and the two settled back into bed. Within minutes, the house returned to silence and sleep reclaimed them, though a faint sense of discomfort lingered in the back of their minds. The morning sunlight crept through the curtains as Taylor and Rachel woke up around 10:30 a.m., feeling rested and ready to start the day. At first, they thought little of the quiet from the guest room, assuming Danielle and Ashley were still catching up on sleep after the previous night's emotionally charged events. "Let's give them some time," Rachel suggested as they moved about the kitchen, preparing coffee and breakfast. Taylor agreed, appreciating the importance of privacy, especially after such a tense evening. As the hours ticked by, their initial calm began to erode. By 2 p.m., the persistent silence from the guest room became increasingly hard to ignore. "Shouldn't they be awake by now?" Rachel asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Taylor hesitated, but ultimately decided to check on their guests. Walking down the quiet hallway, he stopped outside the guest room door. Knocking softly, he called out, "Danielle? Ashley? Everything okay in there?" The lack of response heightened his unease. He knocked louder this time, the sound reverberating through the house. Still, there was no answer. A cold knot of dread began to form in Taylor's stomach. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself and carefully turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a scene that felt wrong in a way he couldn't immediately articulate. The bed was unmade, its sheet. As Taylor pulled back the edge of the blanket, his breath caught in his throat. Beneath the fabric lay a sight that would haunt him forever. Danielle's lifeless body was sprawled on the floor, her skin pale and cold, stripped of her dignity in death. Bruises and cuts marred her once vibrant face, which was now barely recognizable. Blood streaked her features, and the brutal injuries told the story of the unimaginable violence she had endured. Taylor stumbled back, his heart racing, unable to process the horrifying scene before him. The silence of the room pressed down on him, amplifying his panic. Ashley was nowhere to be found, his absence adding a sinister weight to the discovery. Taylor's eyes darted frantically around the room, seeking answers. They stopped at the small, high-set window slightly ajar. The position of the curtain and faint scuff marks near the sill suggested it had been used as an escape route. The realization sent a cold shiver down his spine, confirming the worst. Ashley had fled. Barely able to think, Taylor bolted from the guest room, his breath ragged as he climbed the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into his own room, startling Rachel, who had been lounging on the bed. His words spilled out in a frantic, disjointed rush. But his wide eyes and trembling voice told her all she needed to know. A wave of dread washed over Rachel as she grabbed her phone with shaking hands. She dialed emergency services, her voice cracking as she relayed the horrifying discovery. Each word she spoke felt like a heavy stone dropping into an endless void of despair. When the paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Danielle's lifeless form confirmed what they feared. Their preliminary examination suggested that her death had occurred in the early hours of the morning, around the same time Taylor and Rachel had heard the strange noises from the guest room. The weight of their realization was crushing. The private moment they had dismissed the night before might have been the sounds of Danielle's final moments, and the thought was unbearable. Regret and guilt intertwined with their shock, leaving them devastated. Danielle's body was transported to the forensic laboratory, where experts conducted a detailed examination. The autopsy painted a grim and heart-wrenching picture of her final moments. Her body bore the marks of a savage assault with bruises and abrasions covering her skin. Her face had suffered the worst of the brutality. A broken nose, a fractured jaw, and shattered cheekbones were among the injuries she sustained. Multiple teeth had been knocked out, and the force of the blows had caused a closed skull fracture, along with severe brain hemorrhaging. The findings confirmed the intensity of the violence she had endured. Each injury spoke of relentless brutality. In addition to the physical evidence, detectives were able to gather eyewitness testimony from a neighbor who had seen a man walking away from the house at around 4:30 a.m. Though the neighbor couldn't provide a clear description of the man's face, they noted that his clothing matched what Ashley had been wearing earlier that night. This sighting became a key piece of evidence, helping authorities to establish a more precise timeline of the events leading up to Danielle's death. As investigators continued to dig deeper, they were able to track down a recording of a phone call made by Ashley shortly after the crime took place. Around 4 a.m., just minutes after Danielle had been killed, Ashley had called his mother. The recording revealed a frantic and broken man. His voice was filled with panic as he repeatedly claimed that he hadn't done anything wrong. He insisted through tears that someone else had attacked Danielle in the room, trying to spin a false narrative to explain his involvement. His erratic and contradictory statements only added to the growing evidence against him. Ashley's mistake, however, was leaving his phone on after the call. Authorities used his phone's location signal to track him, leading them to a remote mountainous area. The signal placed him far from the city, an unsettling fact that raised more questions. The detectives now had him cornered, and the evidence was mounting. With each new discovery, it became clearer that Ashley was responsible for the brutal death of Danielle. After fleeing the scene of the crime, Ashley tried to escape to the remote wilderness, hoping to disappear into the desolate landscape. He was eventually found near a scenic overlook by a steep cliff, sitting alone in the cold, barren surroundings. When the police officers found him, they approached cautiously, trying to avoid provoking him. But when Ashley saw them, panic took over, and he jumped up in a sudden burst of fear. He sprinted toward the edge of the cliff and leapt over the safety barrier, his body dangerously teetering on the edge. Ashley clung to the cliff, his body swaying with the wind as he shouted at the officers to stay back. His voice was full of desperation, and he threatened to jump if anyone came closer. The officers immediately recognized the gravity of the situation and knew they needed to act with care. They called in a team of specially trained negotiators and psychologists to handle the delicate standoff. These experts worked tirelessly, speaking to Ashley in a calm and measured way, trying to convince him that if he were innocent, he had no reason to harm himself. For hours, the negotiation continued with little progress. Ashley's emotional state remained volatile, and he refused to step away from the cliff. Despite the reassurances from the negotiators, they kept telling him that there was still time to resolve everything, but Ashley remained unmoved, his grip on the cliff weakening as the hours dragged on. As midnight approached, his mental and physical exhaustion became apparent. His responses grew less coherent, and it seemed as though his strength was failing him. Just as it seemed like Ashley was losing his focus, the officers saw their chance. With a burst of speed and precision, they moved in and grabbed him, pulling him back from the edge. The tense standoff was finally over. But even after his rescue, Ashley's behavior became even more erratic. He screamed uncontrollably and tried to push away the officers as they tried to calm him down. In his agitated state, he continued to threaten to end his life, making it clear that he was in no condition to be questioned or handled normally. The authorities, understanding the seriousness of his state, immediately transferred Ashley to a psychiatric facility. The staff at the facility worked to stabilize him, offering the care and attention he desperately needed. Over the next few weeks, Ashley underwent thorough psychiatric evaluations. The experts quickly determined that he was in an extreme emotional crisis, struggling with intense psychological issues that had pushed him to the brink. After extensive analysis, it was determined that Ashley suffered from excitable psychopathy. This disorder, marked by sudden and uncontrollable bursts of anger, impulsive actions, and aggressive behavior, was believed to be the driving force behind the violent events that had unfolded. His mental instability was clearly a contributing factor to his actions, and the severity of his condition became the focus of the ongoing investigation. Authorities now faced the challenge of dealing with both his psychological health and the grave crimes he had committed. The discovery of Ashley's psychiatric condition gave the authorities and mental health professionals some insight into his unpredictable and violent nature, but it brought little comfort to those mourning the loss of Danielle. While the diagnosis explained part of Ashley's actions, it did nothing to ease the pain of the tragic death of a woman who had so much life ahead of her. As the investigation into his past continued, unsettling truths began to surface. Danielle was not Ashley's first victim. Over the years, more than 10 women had come forward with complaints against him. These women had filed reports with the police, describing terrifying experiences involving physical abuse, stalking, and harassment. These reports created a horrifying picture of a man whose violent tendencies had been repeatedly ignored by the authorities, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The sheer number of victims suggested that this pattern of behavior had been ongoing for years and that Ashley's actions were far from isolated incidents. As investigators dug deeper into Ashley's history, they discovered that his violent behavior was not an isolated part of his adult life, but had been rooted in a deeply troubled childhood. Growing up in a chaotic household, Ashley lacked the stability of a father figure. He also faced the impact of untreated mental health issues, which only worsened as he grew older. From a young age, he showed signs of aggression and erratic behavior, often targeting those closest to him. His first victims were the people who should have been his biggest supporters, his family. Ashley's mother and 2 younger sisters lived in constant fear of his violent outbursts, but they remained silent, too scared to speak out or report his actions. As Ashley entered his teenage years, his aggression only became more pronounced. Teachers and classmates described him as unpredictable, with frequent mood swings that sometimes led to physical confrontations. His temper was explosive, and those around him learned to walk on eggshells to avoid triggering his violent reactions. Despite the chaos in his personal life, Ashley managed to present a charming and composed front to the outside world. His good looks and smooth demeanor made him well-liked in social situations, and he used this to his advantage, manipulating those around him. On the surface, he appeared calm and in control, but those who had close relationships with him knew just how fragile this illusion was. A small slight or minor insult could cause him to snap, revealing a side of him that was terrifying to witness. Ashley's issues with anger and control became even more apparent in his interactions with women. Despite his violent tendencies, his charm seemed to draw women in, allowing him to form relationships with ease. However, behind his magnetic personality was a dangerous mindset. His relationships were often marked by possessiveness, manipulation, and violence. He preyed on the trust of those who got close to him, and as the investigation showed, his treatment of women only became more aggressive and abusive as time went on. Ashley developed a disturbing pattern of intense and obsessive fixations on his romantic partners. He saw them not as individuals with their own autonomy, but as possessions that he could control and dominate. Any attempt by his partners to assert their own independence or disagree with him was met with harsh and often violent retaliation. This behavior was a clear indication of his need for control and his inability to accept that others had their own desires and boundaries. When his relationships ended, Ashley's actions became even more extreme. Unable to handle rejection, he turned to stalking and, in many cases, physically attacking his ex-partners. This pattern of harassment and violence became especially apparent between 2015 and 2021. During this period, at least 11 women came forward with complaints accusing him of harassment, assault, and threats of violence. This growing number of victims highlighted the severity of Ashley's behavior and the clear danger he posed to those around him. What made Ashley even more dangerous was his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. In several cases, he used threats and emotional pressure to convince his victims to withdraw their complaints. In some instances, his victims felt too scared or vulnerable to continue with the legal process, leaving them open to further harm. However, a few women did not back down. They pressed forward with legal action, and restraining orders were issued to try to keep Ashley away from them. Sadly, the legal system's response to Ashley's actions was inadequate. Despite the multiple accusations and restraining orders, his behavior continued to escalate. In early 2021, Ashley's violence reached a new low when he physically attacked a girlfriend, nearly strangling her in the process. The woman showed immense courage by taking the case to court, and Ashley was found guilty of assault. However, the punishment he received was shockingly lenient. Instead of facing a significant prison sentence, he was given a fine, ordered to complete community service, and issued another restraining order. Rather than acting as a deterrent, this punishment seemed to embolden Ashley. Just months after his conviction, he attacked another woman, severely injuring her. This victim, lucky to have escaped with her life, immediately reported the incident to the police, accusing Ashley of attempted murder. This time, the court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed what many had suspected. Ashley was a high risk for reoffending. His violent tendencies were deeply ingrained, and he displayed the impulsive and aggressive behavior that made him so dangerous to others. Despite the psychiatric assessment, the system continued to fail in protecting the victims of Ashley's abuse. His actions seemed to only intensify as time went on, and the justice system's repeated failures to hold him accountable for his past violence allowed him to continue wreaking havoc in the lives of the women he targeted. The cycle of abuse seemed unbreakable, with little hope for those who found themselves in his destructive path. Despite the overwhelming evidence of Ashley's violent past, the court's response was once again shockingly lenient. He was given just a 3-month jail sentence in order to pay restitution to his latest victim. However, no real efforts were made to monitor his behavior or to help him change. Upon his release, Ashley showed no signs of improvement. By 2022, his violent tendencies had escalated even further, with his behavior becoming more erratic and dangerous. In another instance, after his relationship with a former girlfriend ended, Ashley decided to take matters into his own hands. Late one night, he broke into her home with the intent to harm her. He tried to strangle her in a violent attack, but the woman's screams alerted her parents, who rushed to her rescue. Their quick response likely saved her life, and police were soon called to the scene. Ashley was arrested, but once again, his actions were met with little more than a slap on the wrist. The court handed down a 6-month jail sentence for Ashley's crime, but he served only 3.5 months before being released. This leniency proved to be a deadly mistake. Shortly after his release, Ashley met Danielle Finley Jones, and their encounter would have tragic consequences. The brutal murder of Danielle shocked the entire community. The crime quickly became the subject of widespread media coverage, with news outlets dedicating entire segments to the investigation. As the details of Danielle's death spread, 3 more women came forward, sharing their disturbing experiences with Ashley. These women had kept quiet for years, afraid of what might happen if they spoke out. Their accounts added to the growing body of evidence that Ashley was a serial predator. Each of these women described how Ashley had initially appeared to be kind, attentive, and charming, but once they got to know him, his true nature emerged. The women recounted how Ashley would become violent, beating, and, in some cases, attempting to strangle them. What was particularly chilling was that Ashley never used weapons. All the violence he inflicted was done with his bare hands, further emphasizing the physical power he had over his victims. The consistency of these testimonies painted a clear picture of a man who preyed on women, using his charm to gain their trust before revealing the dark and violent side of his personality. This pattern of behavior, along with the tragic murder of Danielle, highlighted the fact that Ashley was a dangerous predator who had been allowed to slip through the cracks of the justice system time and time again. His ability to avoid meaningful punishment only emboldened him, leading to more victims and ultimately a life lost. The community, outraged and heartbroken, could only wonder how many more lives could have been saved if Ashley had been held accountable for his previous crimes. The testimonies of Ashley's victims revealed the painful truth about how the justice system had repeatedly failed them. Despite the overwhelming evidence, many of the women feared that Ashley would once again escape with only a light punishment. Their concerns were rooted in the fact that they had already been let down by the system time and time again. They had watched as Ashley continued his violent behavior without facing any meaningful consequences, and the idea that he might do so again was a constant source of anxiety. As the trial continued, the evidence against Ashley became undeniable. Forensic reports, witness statements, and his long history of violence all pointed to one conclusion: Ashley was guilty. The gravity of his crimes was impossible to ignore, and it seemed that justice would finally be served. This time, it appeared as though Ashley would face the consequences of his actions, and his past violence could no longer be brushed aside. However, just days before his sentencing on April 6, 2024, something unexpected happened. Ashley was found hanging in his jail cell, an apparent suicide. While the circumstances of his death seemed clear, there were still questions. Ashley had shown no remorse for his actions, and in fact, he had been confident that he would be declared insane, which would have sent him to a psychiatric facility rather than prison. Given his past behavior and his violent tendencies, some suspected that Ashley's cellmates might have been involved in his death, particularly since he had reportedly attacked them before. Danielle's family was left shattered by her murder. They were heartbroken by the loss of their loved one, and the pain of her death pushed them to take action. In the wake of their grief, they began campaigning for stricter regulations on dating apps. They proposed the idea of mandatory background checks for users, which would automatically flag those with serious criminal histories. Their hope was that by giving people access to critical information, they could prevent others from falling victim to predators like Ashley. Their goal was clear: to create a safer environment for those looking for relationships and to protect others from experiencing the same pain and loss that they had. Although nothing could bring Danielle back, her family's efforts were aimed at ensuring that her tragic death would lead to a change in the system, one that would make it harder for dangerous individuals like Ashley to hide behind a veil of charm and manipulation. This story serves as a stark reminder of how easily trust can be broken and how the darkest secrets often hide behind the most familiar faces. What seemed like an ordinary situation turned into a nightmare, leaving lives forever changed. It highlights the importance of being aware of red flags and the dangers that can lurk when people hide their true intentions. Thank you for joining us as we explored this unsettling Reddit story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated on more intriguing stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, share your opinions, and if you found this story insightful, consider sharing it with others. Your support keeps us bringing more stories to you. Stay aware, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.